Hello, and thank you for wanting to learn more about the Tigard Police Service's Renewal Levy, which is coming up on the ballot in May 2024. I'm Kelsey Anderson with the Tigard Police Department, along with Chief Kathy McAlpine. And Chief, a lot has happened since 2020 when we first passed this levy. A lot of people have moved to the Tigard community or maybe haven't heard about this levy yet. What would you want people to know as they're starting to hear more about this renewal coming up in May?
If I had to sum it up in one word, it'd be renewal. It's what the voters passed in 2020 and what that has allowed us to do. And that is to add 8 police officers, 1 school resource officer, a couple of support staff, and then training, advanced de-escalation and crisis intervention training for all of our sworn officers.
And so 8 police officers is a really significant number for our department. And to put that into context, if you're not familiar with kind of the lingo of a police department, we have a lot of police officers, but a number of them are in supervisory roles, or they're working as detectives or school resource officers or have other assignments. And so when we're really talking about the officers who are out responding to emergencies and taking calls in the community, right now we have 26 who that is their primary role. So when we're talking about 8, that is a really significant number.
It really is. It makes a difference of the level of service that we can provide to our community. Also the ability to cover a larger area, because as you mentioned, Tigard is growing rapidly over the last 6 years in particular, and so have our calls for service. And so the ability to add more officers on the streets while still being a full service police department. We're the 12th largest in the state, and so full service, I mean traffic, investigations, school resource officers, all that's important for our community.
And I want to look backwards a little bit for those who may not be familiar. How did we settle on this number for 8 for the levy? So this planning really took place several years before the levy was passed. In 2018, 2019, there was an audit conducted about the staffing that we should have for the department based on our population size and our calls for service. And that independent report recommended having 8 additional officers along with that additional school resource officer.
That is correct. Yes, outside consultant did a whole staffing study, and it was really important to get that outside perspective to make sure that we were allocating our resources efficiently and effectively, and that's the recommendation they came up with as well.
And so that's why we went to the voters with that in 2020, and Tigard voters approved that levy. And it is 29 cents per $1,000 of assessed property value. Property values, of course, have changed quite a bit since 2020, but we did get some updated figures. And a renewal would be the same rate, so you would continue paying that 29 cents per $1,000 of assessed property value. And for the average homeowner in Tigard, that's under $8 a month to keep these 8 police officers, school resource officer, and support staff. And Chief, we're talking about how important that is. And you've mentioned our calls for service are going up. Our calls are also becoming more complex and requiring more time and more officers on scene. Can you speak to that?
I can. In 2018, when we started thinking about going out for the levy, and we were just trying to catch up with growth at that time, and calls for service were increasing. But since the last 3-4 years, we've seen the volume, 1,000 more calls for service last year in and of itself, but also the complexity. We've increased in persons and property crimes. We have a lot of calls that have a mental health component or a substance use disorder, and really, we want to be able to have the right number of officers there, slow it down, have some conversations, and all that takes resources and time. Also, with the ballot measure 110 and the decriminalization of hardcore drugs, what we're seeing is without any place to take people for treatment, it's basically coming out onto the streets. And between our unhoused and our substance use disorders, we get a lot of calls on concerning behaviors. It could come out as welfare checks. It could come out as a crime in progress. And we're seeing about 67% of our calls have that component as well.
And what you were talking about with slowing things down, that really is an intentional approach that we as a department are taking. And we have an officer assigned to the mental health resource team. And that has been such a critical component for our community. And that kind of leads into this training that we're also providing all of our officers with advanced crisis intervention and de-escalation.
Yes, and what the public was very, very supportive in hearing that we're going to get that additional training, because when you come out of the academy, you may get 8 hours. And to know that we're dedicating basically a week of extensive training, it's in person, it's with a lot of our providers and interaction and people who have maybe had substance use disorders, so you get to kind of hear from their perspective what it's like to have, police officers come to the calls. And de-escalation is really the end state that you want to get to. And so there's a lot of tools and techniques to go to try and get to that end state. And so having that advanced training has been, I've heard nothing but great things from our officers of a variety of experiences that have gone through that.
And we're trying to educate as many people as we can about this renewal coming up in May. I know you've been speaking at a lot of events. And one of the things that you hear from community members that I think is so interesting is the number of police officers that they think are on duty at any given time across the city. I mean, we have 55,000 people in Tigard. What do you hear from people when they take a guess at how many officers are on duty right now?
It is a variety of numbers. I think this weekend, the highest I heard was about 215. Now, mind you, that was somebody who came from the UK and didn't really know about American policing. So quite shocked to hear the numbers were much lower than that. But our own community members, several were in the 100 to 50 to 30. And when I tell them the actual numbers, they're quite surprised and actually quite concerned. So it's just creating that awareness and what we want to do with the additional, or maintaining those additional resources.
Yeah, and the real number, 3 to 5 police officers on duty across the city of Tigard at any one time. So again, showing the importance of these additional 8 officers that we want to keep on the team. We want to maintain the current police services that we have now. And this is a conversation that hopefully people will be hearing a lot more about as this renewal gets closer, again, on the May ballot. So expect to see some postcards coming to your homes. We hope that you'll come connect with us at community events as we start to do more education and outreach on this topic. And we have a website for our renewal levy as well. That is at tigard-or.gov/police services levy. So please go check that out. And Chief, one thing I love is, you say, we just want to make sure that you have the information you need to make an informed decision, whatever that is for your family.
Absolutely. We understand that, especially coming out of COVID, that it's just very expensive, and individuals are trying to determine what they can afford. And so by this renewal, maintaining it the way it's been already for 4 years, it's just, we hope to provide the level of service that the City of Tigard and the community has come to expect of their police department.
And with that concern over costing, that was one of the reasons that we decided not to ask our community for more right now. We're not asking for an increase. We're just asking to maintain that current rate that is already in place. So,
and one of the things that people don't immediately associate with police, and when we talk about priority 1 and 2 calls, is that's sometimes life-saving measures. And we're sometimes more nimble than the fire department because we're already out in the community. We're in a car. All the officers have AEDs, which is the defibrillators, and the Narcan. And to put it again in perspective, in the last 3 years, we've had 18 events where we've saved a life. About 31 officers been recognized. And so again, when minutes matter and a quick response, the police department is equipped and trained to be able to at least administer first aid until the fire department can get there. And I think that's a critical component for our community as well.
absolutely, yeah. Chief, thank you so much for taking the time
Thank you for
to
having
talk
me.
about
Appreciate it.
And we hope that you'll learn more about this renewal levy, again, coming up in May 2024. And again, that website one more time, it's tigard-or.gov/police services levy.